So I don't have to
You can
report.
still present.
Yeah, you can still present it.
It is.
Welcome back to Senate Education. Mr. Robinson, nice to see you. Really appreciate you being here. One of the things we just said prior to going offline for a minute was, and I think you know this, Health and Welfare is working on the early childhood section of this bill. We have been tasked with coming up with a study on how we could get to a pre-K program. And this committee would take up pre-K next year, but this S56, I'm guessing, I'm looking at my colleagues on Health and Welfare, is still going to move this year with some study language that would kind of tee things up for the pre-K section. So that's the situation we're in. We've heard a little bit from some providers from these would be early childhood educators over the past, last week for a couple of hours. And, we heard things, examining availability of space in schools, talking about understanding credentialing and staffing, that sort of thing. So I think what we'd like to get is your thoughts on what a pre-K study might entail so that this committee could come back and get going on that next year.
Sure. Great. Well, thank you for that. For the record, Colin Robinson, Vermont NEA, and thanks for accommodating me virtually today. So some of you in the building earlier. And I will keep my remarks relatively brief with the hope that we will have an opportunity to come back to the committee as you further work on the language and develop the language and comment. I will also say, just for point of information in particular, I'm sure Senator Campion, but other members of the committee might not be aware of Vermont NEA's position. We have for many years supported expanding universal public pre-K inside a public school setting. And so the general provisions, I know that's not the question before us today, but the general provisions outlined in S56 where we believe the right direction is this matter of state policy. So to that end, as it relates to this question at hand, I think there are many public schools in Vermont that are already providing public pre-K to students, right? Currently, we have a voucher construct through what's commonly known as Act 166 that provides a 10-hour voucher to families that, quite frankly, I don't think meets the needs, and it is what we have. So I think as it relates to this study, I think focusing on, is the 10 hours currently provided in Act 166 meeting the needs of families? 2, what are public school programs providing to families right now in Vermont? Many public school programs, I know you'll be hearing from others, provide public pre-K programs that exceed the 10 hours a week. That's not necessarily universal, but many do, which means local taxpayers are assuming that additional responsibility due to the current pre-K weights. So the weighting task force that did a tremendous amount of work previously tilled a lot of soil on this, but I think having this committee really dig into the pre-K weights would be valuable to understand what public schools are providing pre-K students right now in terms of public pre-K inside a school-based setting, and additionally exploring what would it look like to operationalize the components of S56 to build out a robust public pre-K program inside our public schools, recognizing that transitions are things that take time, and there needs to be commensurate and significant investment in the CCFAP, the Child Care Financial Assistance Program, to fully realize a robust 0 to 5 education environment for all students and families. But a critical component to that, we believe, needs to be the public schools and delivery of pre-K inside a public school setting, and understanding how to fully operationalize that in a robust and intentional way over the coming, you choose the horizon, 4 or 5 years, seems like it would be really critical for this committee or this task force to dig into. So those are kind of top of mind thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. The 10-hour voucher from Act 166. So if you have that voucher, and I probably should know this, of course, you can go to your, a local private provider and use the 10 hours. You could also take it and go to the local public school and put that voucher toward the pre-K there for the, no.
Yeah,
Right, so
I
make
would,
sure.
yeah, I would, I know you're hearing from the superintendents and school boards and principals later in the week.
That just sounded like what you said. Okay.
Yeah, that was, if you're, say, I'll take the example where Senator Gulick lives and where I live as well in Burlington. If you're enrolled in the pre-K program that is at my daughter's elementary school on Main Street, you enroll in that program. There's no voucher construct. It's no different than when I drop my kindergartner off or my fifth grader off. It's you're dropping off your pre-K. Yeah.
Great. And like you said, those programs, there's probably a range in terms of whether those are 20-hour weeks or 30-hour weeks or 40-hour weeks, depending on the school itself, what they're offering.
Yeah, and I think that what we've seen anecdotally, and again, others might be able to speak to this, I think that public schools are continuing their commitment to serving the needs of all students as required by federal law. And with some of for those of you who, again, might not have been there for the bumpiness that emerged in the early years of Act 166, meeting the needs of all students, especially students with special needs, that school districts are required to meet under federal law, it has been really tricky. I think it's a lot of those bumps, many of them have been navigated. I don't know to what degree they feel like I don't want to say they've been resolved, and others can speak to that. But I do think that has created space where school districts have said, well, okay, if we are assuming the duty and responsibility to educate these students as we want to and as we believe is the right thing to do, then we can fully do that and meet the needs of all student learners, create seamless transitions into a kindergarten and K-12 setting by actually building out public pre-K inside our local community schools that exist in the vast majority of towns.
Right. I would like to, you might not be the right person, but I'd like to understand those bumps a little bit more in terms of that rollout with, it sounds like, some kids might have gone to programs where the programs might not have been equipped to work with the kid.
I think, again, I don't want to get ahead of my specific area of expertise. What I do know when it specifically comes to education of special education services, there were some very significant and challenging dynamics that emerged very early on that I think everybody tried to navigate to the best of their ability. The exact sort of status of what that landscape looks like right now, I can't speak to, but I'm sure some of the other folks you might be hearing from would be able to have a better pulse on that in this moment.
Right.
It was again, Senator Campion, of course, you might remember these, but there was a very active conversation on these issues, and Act 166 passed, I believe, in 2014, and kind of those first 3-4 years or so, there was a lot of tweaks along the road.
Yeah. Well, this is helpful. Really, it gives us again some of my colleagues here are living this more daily and regularly and in a deeper way than I am, but this is really helpful in giving us a sense of what might need to be figured out before an implementation program happens. And so this is great. Yes, Senator Williams.
Health and Welfare is dealing with S56 tomorrow from 10 to 12, and then for 1 hour on Friday.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Senator Campion, if I may.
Chair of that committee. Oh, that's right. Okay.
Senator Campion,
Yes, Mr. Robinson.
I apologize. I did want to note that back in the 1980s, when Governor Cunin, one of her big policy initiatives was the creation and expansion of kindergarten inside our public schools. And Vermont was really leading edge on building out that offering inside our public schools. And so Vermont has been a leader in this field. And I think that was the last time as a state we really sort of committed to say, okay, if we're getting serious about tackling these seismic policy solutions that are foundational to our economy, our communities, and our students, then we have to perhaps crack a couple eggs to make some omelets, to use a silly term perhaps, but
No, I would agree, that is silly, but I get it. Mr. Robinson, so have you, if I were to go back and you guys every year, I'm sorry, NEA talk about pre-K as a priority? I'm looking through, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I would come through with our priority list, and I don't recall, at least being in this chair of this committee, that you've come forward and said pre-K is it this year. So which I appreciate, but has that been long-term?
So it's been our long-term position, and it's been part of our legislative agenda. I will say, as I'm sure you can all appreciate, with any legislative priorities, they're just that. They're priorities. They're the things that, by virtue of circumstance, rise to the top. Yeah. But this is definitely something that we've engaged with our members about, and quite frankly, and this just came up in House Education earlier today, talking about how the education workforce in Vermont is over 20,000 strong when you roll it all up, and it's a predominantly female workforce, and the issues of childcare and pre-K are really foundational, not only to our entire workforce, but also the education workforce, and making sure we're able to retain high quality educators working in our schools. So it's a complex issue.
And we'll dig into this, but I will be interested in knowing just, if you think, you don't have to tell us right now, because I think we're going to hear from all of you later in the week. Are the buildings ready for this generally? I know we're moving forward with school construction, but we've also seen a decrease in the number of students. So classroom space, that kind of thing, is something I think is just on everybody's mind and something to think about.
Yep. I would encourage you to engage your other, the superintendents, school boards, and principals on this as well. I will say, I do believe, it depends on the school district and it depends on the school, but I do think in some cases, where districts, I just heard last week about it was a school in Chittenden County. They realized they were going to have one fewer fifth grade, so they're going to turn that fifth grade classroom, I believe, into a pre-K classroom, right?
Yeah.
So I think schools are being dynamic and responding to student populations, community needs, and how they can best serve all their constituencies, including taxpayers. Because at the end of the day, right, we're talking about public education dollars that taxpayers are voting on in their local budgets. And the role and duty of school board members is to make sure that those dollars are being used as adequately and as properly as possible to meet the needs of all our learners. And I think that includes the pre-K context and setting as well.
Yeah. Senator Julie.
Hey, Colin, thanks for being here. The 20,000 people education workforce, is that K to 12?
Yes, and that is a very rough, top of mind estimate. So please don't quote that exact number, but yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, pre-K, I would say pre-K 12, because as I said, as we know, many of our public schools are already working in the pre-K space.
But just to clarify, that does not include the independent providers.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions from Mr. Robinson? Okay. Hey, thanks, Colin. Really appreciate it.
Good to see you all. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be there in person today, but hopefully I'll see you all around the building tomorrow.
Okay, thanks.
Be well. Thank you.